They found his radio still transmitting. 11 days after he vanished, just static, and underneath it, if you listened close, something that sounded almost like breathing. Not his. This is the story of Walter Finch, a forest ranger who crossed a fence line that wasn't supposed to exist anymore, and what was waiting for him on the other side never let him leave. Stay until the end. The worst part isn't what took him, it's who came to collect him. Walter had worked the Hollow Pine District for 19 years. Quiet man, methodical, the kind who logged every fallen tree in a little leather notebook. He knew every trail, every deer path, every place the light didn't quite reach right. And he knew the fence. It had stood at the eastern boundary since before he was born. 8 feet of rusted iron mesh, swallowed by ivy, strung with faded signs nobody bothered reading anymore. Private land. Do not cross. No one in town could say who owned the land behind it. No one had ever needed to ask. That changed on a Tuesday in late October. Walter was doing his usual perimeter walk when he stopped and stared and counted the distance twice because he didn't believe what he was seeing. The fence was gone, not broken, not cut, not fallen. Gone, for nearly 2 miles in a perfectly straight line, as if it had simply been lifted out of the world. No tire tracks, no tool marks, no churned earth where 8-foot posts should have been ripped from the ground. Just grass. Undisturbed grass, like nothing had ever stood there at all. Walter radioed it in. His supervisor laughed, told him he'd misjudged the trail, told him to check his coordinates, so Walter checked them 3 times. The boundary was exactly where it had always been. The fence simply wasn't on it anymore. He stood there a long time, notebook open, pen not moving, because for the first time in 19 years he didn't know what to write down. And somewhere past where the fence used to be, the trees were different. Taller, closer together, black at the roots in a way healthy bark never gets. He should have walked away right then. He tells you that himself, later, or whatever was left of him does, but Walter Finch had spent 19 years being the kind of man who finishes what he starts. So he stepped over the line where the fence used to be. 1 foot, then the other, and in the recording from his own body cam, the only footage that was ever recovered, you can hear him say 4 words right before the audio cuts to static. It's so quiet here. Quiet isn't the right word, really. Not silence, absence, no birds, no insects, no wind moving the branches, even though Walter could feel wind on his skin. His own footsteps didn't echo. His own breathing sounded wrong, like it was happening a half-second behind when he actually breathed. He told himself it was low blood sugar. He told himself a lot of things in those first few minutes. Every one of them was wrong, because something in those trees had already noticed him, and it had been waiting a very, very long time for someone to cross that line. Here's where it gets strange, and I want you to remember this detail because it matters later. Walter didn't run. He couldn't, not because something grabbed him with hands, because the path behind him simply wasn't there anymore. He turned around to leave the way he came, and the meadow, the missing fence line, the world he'd just walked out of, gone, replaced by more trees, more of that wrong, swallowing quiet. He turned a full circle, twice, and every direction was the same forest, stretching on forever, like the woods had folded the exit shut behind him. That's when he heard it. Not a growl, not footsteps, a voice, low, layered, like several people speaking the same word a half-second apart, never quite in sync. It didn't come from one direction. It came from the ground, from the bark, from inside his own skull all at once. It said his name. Not Walter, not Ranger. It used the name his grandmother called him as a child, a name no living person had spoken to him in over 30 years. And in that moment, Walter Finch understood, with total clarity, that something in this forest already knew everything about him. I need to pause here and tell you something the official report leaves out. Walter wasn't the first. 3 hikers in the 90s, a surveyor in 2004, a poacher in 2011. His rifle was found leaning neatly against a tree, fully loaded, like he'd simply set it down and walked off without it. None of them were ever found. All of them crossed that same fence line on a day when, for reasons nobody could explain, the fence simply wasn't there. And every single one of their files was marked the same way in the county archive. Case closed, no further action, the voice spoke again. This time it gave him an instruction. Simple, almost gentle, walk. And Walter, a grown man, a hunter, someone trained to survive alone in wilderness for weeks, found his legs moving before his mind agreed to it. He wasn't being dragged. That's the part that would haunt him most, in whatever was left of his thoughts later. He was obeying. His body had already decided. The voice was something to be obeyed, the way a hand pulls back from fire before the brain even registers heat. The forest had reached inside him and found the wire that controlled his will. He walked for what felt like an hour. It was 11 days. We know that now because of the timestamp buried in the corrupted body cam file. A file that, by the way, the department tried to delete twice. Both times it reappeared on the server the next morning, fully restored, like something wanted this story told. 11 days of walking, and Walter Finch never once stopped to eat, drink, or sleep. When they finally recovered his body weight records from before and after, he had lost only 2 pounds. Something out there wasn't starving him. It was keeping him. The forest changed around him as he walked, though he couldn't have told you when. The pines gave way to older trees, species that botanists, when shown photographs later, couldn't identify at all. Bark like dried muscle. Roots that moved slowly, the way a sleeping animal's ribs rise and fall. And carved into dozens of these trunks at exactly eye height were names. Dozens of them, some fresh. Some so old the wood had grown almost shut around the letters, swallowing them the way a wound swallows a splinter, leaving just enough showing to still be read. He found his own name carved there on the 9th day. Walter Finch, already in the bark, already healing shut at the edges, weeks before he'd ever picked up a knife to make it himself. Because 3 days later, the voice told him to, and his hands, again, simply obeyed. If you're keeping count, the forest didn't just take him. It knew he was coming before the fence even disappeared. And that raises a question we are going to come back to, because the answer is so much worse than anything that's happened so far. From the 9th day on, Walter stopped resisting entirely. The reports, and yes, there are reports, smuggled out later by someone we'll talk about soon, describe him as compliant, a clinical word for something much sadder. A man hollowed out and operated like a puppet. On a hand he could no longer feel reaching inside him. He gathered things when told. He buried things when told. Once, for 6 straight hours, he simply stood in a clearing, facing a tree, not moving, because no instruction had come yet telling him he was allowed to stop. Now, who was leaving these reports? A groundskeeper. An old man named Edgar Voss, who lived in a cabin near the boundary and, it turned out, had quietly served this land for almost 50 years. Edgar wasn't a victim. He was a witness, and when investigators finally tracked him down months later, he said something that every single person on that case force still refuses to discuss on the record. The fence doesn't fail. The fence chooses, and when it lets you through, it's because something in there has already decided it wants you. Edgar's family had kept this land for generations, not as owners, but as caretakers, bound by a contract none of them had ever seen written down. only inherited the way you inherit a fear instead of a fact. His grandfather built the fence, not to keep people out. Edgar was very specific about that detail, and you should remember it. The fence wasn't built to keep people out of the forest. It was built to keep something contained inside it, and every few decades, when its hunger outgrew its patience, the fence would simply let go. So here's the question I promised we'd come back to. If the forest knew Walter's name before he ever crossed the line, if his name was already healing into the bark days before he carved it, then the fence didn't disappear by accident on the day he walked his route. It disappeared because it was his turn. Something in that forest had already chosen him, weeks, maybe months in advance, the way a spider doesn't choose its web's location at random. It builds the web exactly where it already knows something is going to walk. By day 14, Walter had stopped being entirely Walter. Edgar's notes describe his eyes as settled, not glazed, not vacant, but calm in a way no captive person should ever look. He'd started speaking sometimes in that same layered voice the forest used, a half second out of sync with his own lips. He referred to himself twice in the third person, using his grandmother's old nickname for him, the one only the forest should have known. Whatever was inside those trees wasn't just controlling Walter's body anymore. It was learning how to wear him. And then, on the 17th day, everything in the forest went still in a new way. Not the absence quiet from before, a waiting quiet. Edgar wrote one line in his final entry before he stopped keeping notes altogether. Something is coming to see what it caught. Because here's the part nobody tells you about a forest like this. The thing in the trees that takes you, that's not the worst thing living there. It's a servant, a groundskeeper, same as Edgar, just on the other side of the fence. And servants like that always answer to someone. The owner arrived the way storms arrive in places that don't get weather warnings. All at once, with no buildup, the temperature dropping so fast that ice formed on Walter's eyelashes in under a minute. The trees themselves leaned away from where it walked, the way grass bends from wind, except there was no wind. Edgar, watching from a ridge with binoculars he later destroyed, said the thing didn't have a shape so much as a suggestion of one. Something the human eye refused to hold steady, sliding off it the way your gaze slides off the sun. I want to be honest with you about something. I've read every page of what Edgar smuggled out before this case was sealed. I'm not going to describe everything that happened next in detail, because some of it shouldn't be repeated, even as a story. But I will tell you this. The forest had been keeping Walter obedient and unharmed for 17 days for one single reason. It wasn't done with him. It was presenting him. Like a hunting dog drops something living and twitching at its master's feet, tail wagging, waiting to be told whether it did well. Edgar said the owner didn't speak the way the forest voice had spoken. It didn't need words. It simply looked, if look is even the right word, at Walter, and Walter's entire body went rigid, every joint locking at once. The way a man freezes, not from fear, but because something has reached into the part of the brain that controls fear and turned the dial all the way past what a human nervous system was built to survive. Edgar wrote that Walter didn't scream. He couldn't. His throat had already been told, somehow, that screaming wasn't permitted. This is the part Edgar refused to write down fully. Investigators found only one more line in his journal after this point, scrawled so hard the pen tore through the page. It didn't kill him. It would have been kinder if it killed him. Whatever the owner did to Walter Finch in the minutes that followed, it left him alive, breathing, walking. The forest let him go 11 days later, exactly where the fence used to be, except the fence was back, fully restored, rust and ivy and all, as if it had never left. And Walter walked straight through it. A hunter found him on the road 2 miles out, sitting cross-legged in the gravel, perfectly calm, hands folded in his lap, like he was waiting for a bus that was never coming. Physically, the hospital found almost nothing wrong with him. Mild dehydration, some scratches, nothing close to what 11 days lost in wilderness should produce. Mentally, the report uses one word, over and over, in different phrasing each time, like the doctor writing it couldn't find a better one and hated himself for it. Absent. Walter Finch came back. Whatever made him, Walter Finch did not. Here's where most stories like this would end. I wish this one did too. Walter went home. His wife, Eleanor, said the man who walked through her front door had his face, his voice, even his old habit of tapping his wedding ring against his coffee mug 3 times before drinking. But she said something to investigators that I haven't been able to stop thinking about since I first read it. He remembered every detail of our life together perfectly. He just didn't seem to understand why any of it had mattered to him. Eleanor began locking the bedroom door at night, not because Walter ever hurt her. He never did, not once, not with his hands, but because she'd wake at exactly 3:17 every morning to find him standing at the foot of the bed, facing the window, perfectly still, eyes open, watching the tree line at the edge of their property. The same tree line that, if you traced it on a map, ran in an unbroken line all the way back to the boundary fence 11 miles away. Something out there still knew exactly where to find him. 3 weeks after he came home, Walter started writing again in his old leather field notebook. The one habit Eleanor thought meant he was healing, he wasn't. When she finally looked through it after he was gone, every single page, front to back, 210 pages, contained only one repeated phrase, written smaller and smaller as it went. Like something was running out of room inside his hand to keep writing it. It is still deciding if I was enough. On page 210, the handwriting wasn't his anymore at all. Eleanor woke one morning to an empty house and a single open window on the 2nd floor. The kind that doesn't open from the inside without a struggle, found open without a single broken latch or scratch on the frame. Walter's slippers were still by the bed. His car was still in the driveway. The tree line behind their house was 11 miles from the forest boundary. Remember, 11 miles he would have had to walk, barefoot, in November, in under 6 hours, for the search dogs to lose his scent exactly where the old fence line used to run. They never found him this time. No body cam, no radio, no journal entries. Just one single detail in the search report, buried on page 6, that nobody who worked that case will explain on camera. When the search team finally reached the fence 11 days later, the same fence, restored and rusted and laced with ivy, there was a fresh name carved into the post at exactly eye height. Not Walter's, a new one. Edgar Voss confirmed it was a name belonging to no one in town. No missing persons file, nothing. Until 3 months later, when it did, Edgar Voss died 2 winters after Walter's 2nd disappearance. Peacefully, in his sleep, the coroner said, though Edgar's own final letter, left for whoever inherited the caretaker's contract next, said something different. It finally let me retire. I served my 50 years. I hope whoever reads this understands what that means. Someone always has to take my place. The land doesn't ask. It simply decides, and one morning, you'll wake up already knowing your turn has come, the same way Walter must have known his the morning that fence came down. The caretaker's contract, as far as anyone can determine, has never gone unfilled. Someone always steps into it, sometimes a relative, sometimes a stranger, who simply shows up in town one day and buys the cabin without ever explaining why. The current caretaker, according to county tax records, took over the position 14 months ago. No name is listed, just an address, the old Voss cabin, 11 miles from where Walter Finch once stood, staring at 2 miles of perfectly undisturbed grass, wondering where a fence that had stood his whole life could possibly have gone. People still ask why the county never sealed off the property entirely, never sent in real investigators, never told the public the truth about what's out there. The honest answer might be simpler and worse than any cover-up. Maybe nobody who finds out what's really past that fence line survives long enough, or stays sane enough to convince anyone else. Maybe every official who's looked into it closely enough has quietly understood the same thing Edgar understood after 50 years of service, that some doors aren't meant to be closed. They're meant to be watched, fed, and never, ever opened twice. So if you ever find yourself walking a property line you've known your whole life, and one day, for no reason anyone can explain, the fence simply isn't there anymore, I want you to remember Walter Finch. I want you to remember that the quiet on the other side isn't peace, it's a held breath. And I want you to remember that whatever takes you in there isn't even the thing you should be afraid of. It's just the groundskeeper. It's just doing its job, collecting something for someone who is, even now, already deciding whether you'll be enough. Walter Finch's badge was returned to his department exactly 1 year to the day after he first vanished. Nobody delivered it. It was simply there, on the front desk, polished, undamaged, like it had never spent a single day in dirt or rain. Pinned beneath it was a single torn page from a leather field notebook, in handwriting that wasn't quite his. It read, "Tell the next one the quiet means it already knows your name." If this story kept you watching to the very end, you already understand something. Most people never let themselves consider. Some boundaries don't fail by accident. They open exactly when something on the other side is ready for you.